We're now ready to move on to the next portion of our forum, candidates for town council. The candidates are Arn Jorgensen, Catherine Kat Rupert, Jonathan Schechter, and Devin Beeman. We'll follow the same format as with the previous forums, an icebreaker question, rotating question where everyone gets a chance to go first, red cards, which you can use, to elaborate, refute an issue, or use as they see fit, and then a 1-minute wrap-up summary. You, the audience, can also submit questions via note cards, which will be collected by Sandy Schukrine, a Legal Women Voter member, who will give them to the media panelists to be added to their question. We are very fortunate tonight to have Sophie Boyd-Flegel from Jacksonville News and Guide and Carolyn Chapman from Buckrail. So our icebreaker question will start with Sophie to Arn.
Hello, everyone. Ooh. This is great. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to the audience for being here. It's great to see all of you. We would like everyone to please state their name, their job, and how you represent the people of Jackson.
Thank you very much for the question. Arn Jorgensen, I'm an architect, and the way I represent this community is listening, being engaged. Born and raised in this community, I listen carefully and I observe. I've been observing town adjacent to town government for 30 years. That's how I do this work. The other thing I just want to start out by saying, and also taking part in these forums, thank you to all of the partners, the library. If I try to go through the list, I will miss somebody, so I'm going to say everybody. The other thing I want to add is acknowledge Clarion Law as somebody who is the pinnacle of public service, and just wanted to acknowledge her and her life and her commitment. So that's, if we can even get to a fraction of what she's done for this community, we'll all do well for each other and the community.
Are we standing up? Okay. Okay. My name is Catherine Kat Rupert, and I'm a project engineer for a local construction company in town. And I think I represent kind of a sector of the community that's a little bit different than before. I'm 26 years old. I work here in Teton County, and I'm a renter in town. And I think I bring a fresh perspective, some new ideas, and just some new blood to the town council that I think is very much needed. So that's why I'm running for town council. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And thank you, Caroline, and thank you, Sophie, and to the league, and to all of you. Running for office it's a lot of work, but it's surprisingly fun. And the reason it's fun is because, laugh, Mike, ha. But it's fun because in the last panel really got at it. It's because it gives us a chance to deeply listen and to hear so many different sides of the community. And that's really the essence of representation in our system. It's getting out there, it's talking, it's actively listening, and then it's taking those ideas that come in and try to turn them into action. Because the ultimate goal is to leave this place better than we found it. And in doing that, for us to work together collectively, it's really, at the end of the day, it's a tremendous challenge, but it's a great deal of fun and it's a great honor.
Thank you. I'm Devin Beeman. I'm a realtor, and I grew up here in Jackson. I represent our community because I am one of you. I have had the struggles that a lot of our community members have had. I've been in the thick of it during this campaign. I've made a promise to myself to really put it out there. I am great at showing up, putting a smile on my face, and showing you all only one side of myself, a successful woman that's made it through some thick and thin times. But I need to start sharing those times because I get what people are going through. I get it, how one emergency room visit with your toddler can change your life. And I get it, how our older folks are getting pushed out of the valley from the property taxes being so high. I've kind of been in between all the stages, and I get it. So that's how I represent you, as I'm one of you.
Thank you. Our first policy governance question will come from Carolyn, and it will go to Kat.
Hi, Kat. What do you think is the biggest misconception about housing in Jackson?
The biggest misconception about housing. Ooh, I got it. I think the biggest misconception is that only government alone can take care of can take care of us with regards to housing and affordable housing. I understand the importance of having government help out and aid us in that within our community, but I also want to make sure that we get government kind of off the private sector's back, especially those homeowners and those locals, those longtime locals that have been here for forever, to enable them to utilize what they can do to provide housing for people in Jackson. And what does that look like? I know of a family in the town of Jackson who currently has a house and is renting out the bottom floor of their house in an apartment space. They'd like to build another apartment on their property and rent out the upper portion of the house they have currently. And right now, because of the permitting fees and the restrictions and the regulations on what they can do with their property, they might not even be able to go through doing that. And so I think, again, just to reiterate, a common misconception is that government is our only answer. Is it part of the answer? Absolutely. I understand the need for affordable housing to come for your government. But I also think there's a point where government needs to allow the private sector to do its job.
Thank you. It's a fascinating question, and to present a little bit of a contrast, I think the biggest misconception is that the private sector can actually solve our housing problem. What lands in the lap of government are the most difficult problems facing our community, the ones that the private sector alone or the public or the nonprofit sector alone can't solve. We get the toughest problems coming in, and the reason that we have an affordable housing department, the reason that we have a housing trust, the reason that we have Habitat for Humanity is because something that we relied on for decades, for almost a century in this community, started to show that it wasn't working. And that was relying strictly on the private sector to supply our housing needs. And so government had to step in because it was such a strong and immediate and urgent problem, and it still is. Can government solve it by itself? No. Can we, acting together, solve it? I believe we can. I believe we can, acting together, solve any problem. And the biggest thing that government can do on that is to convene and bring people together, particularly in a limited government state like Wyoming. But in terms of biggest misconception, we are in this pickle because what basically... I was hearing voices. Okay, maybe I'm on the wrong track. I'm sorry. But and there goes your timing.
No, it's okay.
Okay. Anyway, where I just wanted to conclude was that the private sector alone cannot take care of it because the thing that makes the most sense for the private sector is to build big, expensive homes because that's the most profitable. And that's why we have that's part of why we have a housing problem. And that's why we all together need to act to address it.
The biggest misconception is that it's too late to change anything, that the horse is out of the barn and, for a lack of a better word, we're screwed here, right? How is anybody with a regular job ever going to have a home? They can. But Jackson, we gotta make some changes right now. The window of opportunity to make those changes with our zoning, our LDRs, and the things that bring the public and the private together to fix these problems is closing. The light is very tiny at the end. We've got to get decision makers at the helm that are ready to make the bold decisions and realize that we can make the changes now to fix some of this stuff. It's not too late, so we can't give up hope.
Thank you. I very much appreciate the question, the misconception. I think that's a great way to frame this. I think there are a couple of them. One of them is, and I appreciate the range of responses that we've had, but I think one of them is, what have we done? We've been working on housing. Yes, it's a crisis today. We've been working on housing for 30 years. We have going on 1,500 restricted units that are housing key members of our community. I think that that's sometimes overlooked. Where would we be if we had not been doing that work? And that work has been done by all of the above: private sector, philanthropy, government investment, all of that. The town of Jackson has done many things, particularly recently, in terms of increasing density, making it easier, reducing barriers in terms of permitting processes if your housing is 100% restricted. There are many things that we are doing. And I think the other misconception, and it's an interesting one, which is the why. We all have our, whether it's regulation, whether it's supply, all of those things. I think there's a simpler answer to that. The reason we have a housing problem is because people with wealth are attracted to this community. We've created a community over the last 50 to 100 years of a place that people want to come to. That's a success. And people with means want to come here for a variety of reasons. They will always outbid you if you're making your money within our local economy. And I think that it's that simple. And what can we put in place to ensure that we're providing opportunities for people that live and work in this community, that those opportunities and those investments, whether it's political will saying yes, or whether it's public investment is making sure that those units are restricted for future generations.
Great. The next question will come from Sophie, and Jonathan will answer first.
Due to comprehensive zoning revisions that were adopted by the town council in 2018, people are noticing the town's rapidly changing look and feel. This is in addition to other forces as well, but in other words, it's community character. Is our zoning working? What does community character mean to you?
What a great question. Thank you. Let me start with the back end. What is community character? Community character is about a sense of belonging. That's the touch point. I would like to have our community be one where everybody feels as though they belong in some fashion, in some way. That there's a point of connection, that we don't feel isolated from one another, and that collectively we come together. And I think government can help create that sense of belonging by being open, by being empathetic, by being responsive. As far as zoning, I don't think it's working very well, and it's something that we have to take a look at. And the reason I think part of the problem is, and it gets to the speed of growth and change in our community, that over the last 10 years or so, 12 years, we started planning, the current comprehensive plan, we started to plan that right after the recession. And so a lot of the things that we have in place. Okay, maybe I could just hold it up the speaker and make it give at least as good an answer as I could. But I think basically what started to happen is that we started creating rules that were appropriately responsive to the times. But the times were coming out of a very deep recession, and we were struggling as a community. But with a lot of things in government, it takes a while to play out, and we are seeing the consequences of something. And the kind of change that we've been going through over the last 10 years are accelerating, and COVID has just thrown fire on that. So we are moving at a much, much more rapid pace, and it's outpacing the private sector's ability to cope, the public sector's ability to cope, and the nonprofit sectors to cope. That's the essence of it as I see it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with the zoning. It's not working. We can see it as we drive down the streets. We see the big box houses with the accessory residential units, which is an ARU. We hear people call it a lot, sitting vacant. The houses are sitting vacant. The yards have gone away, and we have big boxes. And then there's also these neighborhoods that we're designating transitional zoning, which was originally, the intent was to create more multifamily units on them, but what it's actually done is driven up the real estate prices in those areas because people can come in, the wealthy people that want to be here, they can pay a higher bidding price than the others, locals, and they are building larger homes for themselves. So it's actually driving the prices up in some of these areas. So it's not working. What was the last part of it? Community character? What does it mean to me? I'm going to bring it back to why I'm running and what our local government needs to be doing, and it is making everybody feel welcome. It's making access for everyone so that they have the ability to participate, and it's making them not feel unwelcome for having an opinion of their own that's maybe different from theirs, which was not how I was received every time I went to a town council meeting or I submitted public comment that was very thoughtfully written. I got really rude responses back, and I vow to never do that to anybody, no matter how much we disagree. So that's my community thing.
Thank you for the question. So I think the premise of the question about the zone change in 2018, a lot of what we're seeing in change in this community predated that. There were some changes in the transition zones that we are seeing the outcome, some of those multifamily units. Many of the residential units that we've seen and the commercial development we've seen, that is an intensity of development that we've had embedded in our regulations since the early 90s. And what we're seeing today is an economic marketplace that is providing for that opportunity to change. That needs to be addressed. We need to we realize that some of those changes need to be adjusted. The land development regulations are an iterative document. This is something that we need to do a better job looking strategically in the long term on where do we make changes so that we reduce barriers for the type of projects we want and increase barriers for the type of projects that we don't. That's going to take time. It's going to take some back and forth, but it is definitely something that is our role and our responsibility. Community character to me is it's people in this community and how we engage in our public lands and this place. That's what makes this place so special. I was born and raised in this community, but we did, for a variety of reasons, spend time in Ecuador, Maryland, school in Montana, and then time in New England before I came back here. What all of those places taught me, and what my time as an executive, or as a founding board member and emeritus member of the Housing Trust and emeritus member of the Wyoming Community Foundation, those experiences of community to me, it's about the people, it's about the place. That's what makes this place the community. That's what defines the community character of this place. Thank you.
Well, I agree with bits and pieces from what the other candidates have said tonight. Ultimately, is zoning working as it is? No, I don't agree, but just to offer another perspective, I don't actually agree that the zoning is being applied equally either. When it comes to the rodeo and fairgrounds, the exhibit hall that I think many of you know about is plan to demolish that, take an acre away from the rodeo and fairgrounds, and put up a housing project, an affordable housing project. They didn't go through a rezone because of how they interpreted the zoning. And it was interpreted differently for that project than it was for others. And what that enabled is that it didn't go to the ballot as a referendum to let voters decide whether it should be rezoned or not. I see that as a problem. So it's making sure that we're interpreting these laws the same and equally every single time we approach these projects. Now, when it comes to community character, I love that entrance sign when you enter Teton County, especially the one up on the pass that says, "Howdy, stranger, yonder lies Jackson Hole, the last of the Old West." I think we have something so special here. We really are the last of the Old West, and I think a way to preserve that character is to preserve those rodeo and fairgrounds. Right now, there's no place to move them. We don't have the money to move them, and they're being whittled away right before our eyes. We started with 26 acres, and we're down to just over 12 after this last housing project made its way through. I think we need to preserve those rodeo and fairgrounds, and that I think will help us preserve a little bit of our community character.
Thank you. These are great questions, and I love hearing the perspectives of all these candidates. So the third question is going to come from Carolyn, and Teton will go first.
There's 48 units of affordable housing going in where the exhibit hall is. It sparked a community debate about Western heritage. You should live in Jackson. So please respond to Kat's concern about zoning for the fairgrounds. Does more housing threaten Jackson's Western heritage?
Well, she did a great segue into this question without knowing it. I was kind of assuming that one was going to pop up at some point. I'm a 4-H leader. I grew up rodeoing. I've used those fairgrounds. They're inadequate, quite honestly. I would love to see a better facility. Does that mean I want to see that one go away and our Western heritage go away? Absolutely not. I do believe that there can be more transparency with our local government when we're going through these processes, because unless you're nerds like us that go and sit through these meetings, you don't really know what's going on, right? So it is being whittled away at. I think that there can be a balance of both Western heritage, housing, and we can do it all. It doesn't have to be one or another here in our community.
Thank you. I very much appreciate the question. So, just to make it really clear, when I talk about the rodeo and fairgrounds, I talk about the area north of the road as the key core area of the rodeo and the fairgrounds. We're talking about an area south of the road. The event building, that I spent many hours in that building as a kid, so did my siblings. Both of my mothers had exhibits in that building in the 70s. It's something that is near and dear to my heart. We're replacing that building. That building is getting replaced with newer, more flexible space in the space where the fire EMS, the temporary location of fire EMS. That's an improvement. That's a vast, vast improvement. As far as the rodeo grant, and I'm proud of the affordable rental project that we have approved, and it is going forward. We can always do better on transparency. This is a project that is meeting a need in this community that we have not met in 18 years. It is truly affordable. We're leveraging tax credits, federal programs that are a nationwide program, and other federal money to provide for housing that frankly we have not been providing in this community. What is heritage? Western heritage is about the people. It's about the people in this community, and housing them is important. It's part of that equation. It's not an either or. 4 years ago, standing in this room, a question about the fair board, the fair was asked. My response at that time, and it's the same right now, if there is a landing site that's identified, the fair board has identified, they would like more space, then let's sit down and look at what that opportunity can present. But until that happens, we're not moving the fairground to the rodeo.
So I get to respond to that? Can you repeat it for me, please?
Yeah, of course. We ask people to respond to your concern about zoning for the fairgrounds. Kat, you can answer the question, does more housing threaten Jackson's Western heritage?
No, I agree with what other candidates have said. It's not an either or. Just because I like to preserve our Western heritage by preserving the rodeo and fairgrounds doesn't mean I'm adverse to affordable housing. The thing with that particular location is it is taking away a perfectly good building that was used for plenty of activities, 4-H activities. It's literally the exhibit hall, so it's used during the fair, quinceañeras, all kinds of things. And I just see it as just kind of, it's been a bit targeted, because what I've recently learned is that there are 3 lots on Flat Creek that are perfectly usable for the town that haven't been used. So why did we choose to demo a perfectly good building to put up a housing project that is needed when we had available space elsewhere that didn't infringe on these rodeo and fairgrounds? So I'm just looking for some common sense solutions here while preserving our Western heritage.
So I'd like to ask the audience a question. If you love the fair, would you raise your hand?
What was that?
If you love the fair, would you raise your hand? So I don't see any hands not being raised. And so that to me is the point of departure for this conversation. Everybody loves the fair. Everybody loves the rodeo. There's not a question about that. Whether you're really young or really old, it ties our community together, and we have to honor and respect that. The second thing, the second part of my response is this is a non-issue as I see it. Nobody running for office today will be voting on the fairground because we have extended the lease of the fairground till 2030. And so it's going to go on for another 8 years, as is the rodeo. And so the trigger point is that little parcel of grassy area in the southeast corner, which rarely gets used. And the question is, and it's the fundamental kind of question that comes in front of governance, what is the best use of that particular property? Is it character? Is it an empty lawn for 51 plus weeks of the year? Is it affordable housing on a really meaningful scale? Those are the kinds of issues that we have to face. And I think asking these larger questions rather than focusing on the smaller details of the fairground and that one little piece of grass that is rarely used, I think we lose sight of the larger issues that come back to how much we all love the fair and why we should pay attention to that rather than the smaller issue of one little piece.
And I believe that Devin wants to use a red card.
Yes, please.
Right.
So that piece of grass doesn't get used because it's full of dog poop, quite frankly, but the building does get used a lot, like Kat was saying. And I did email the town council a few weeks ago. I heard back from Councilman Rooks. He's the only one that responded to me because I found out that the exhibit hall is going to be torn down, and then the new one that was just built is going to be remodeled, and they're just putting out bids for it right now. And then it's gonna be maybe, if we're lucky, after fair next year. Well, as a 4-H leader, it is not okay with me that the kids and myself have nowhere to go inside this winter because it is really cold outside. So it's not many people want their barnyard animals in their houses either, which is, I think, what my garage is gonna turn into this winter with the small animal project. So that is totally unacceptable to me, and I forgot to say that when I first answered, and I think that's really important that we hold our electeds accountable, that if they're gonna take something away from our community, we have to have somewhere immediately for us to go.
Thank you, I'm glad that we're using the red cards, it gives us an opportunity to hear more. So the next question is going to be asked by Sophie, and Art answers it first.
We did get at least one. We have a lot of audience questions. Thank you. We're definitely not going to do all of them. But one of them overlaps with one of our questions, another about housing. And it's about workforce housing. Developers and local businesses are incentivized with density bonuses for projects that include small portions of workforce housing. Is the workforce housing designation working? And the audience question points out that often workforce housing, as opposed to income capped affordable housing, is not attainable for many members of the workforce. So the question is the workforce housing designation working?
So there's a two-part answer. The short answer is yes. The intent was to develop more restricted units. The other part of that question is, do we need to tweak it? Do we need to get more public benefit out of it? And I would answer to that, yes. We do need to look at what is the trade-off that we're getting. This is a program and a restriction that simply says you must work in Teton County. It does not have an income cap. The price on an ownership house is established with the first transaction. It is then capped at appreciation of roughly 3% a year beyond that, so it gets more affordable over time. Most of the units that are getting built are part of that incentive program. And so it's something where we're leveraging the private sector and their ability to provide a public benefit. I do think that one of those land development tweaks that I had talked about earlier is on this project, this program, where we should look at, do we increase the rate, get some income units out of that as well? Because clearly there is a demand and interest in this program and making sure we're not leaving a public benefit on the table. I do think it's important to recognize that the continuum of housing need goes from homelessness to people making two very good incomes working in Teton County. It includes affordable rentals, affordable ownership at many, many different levels. The workforce restriction is only intended at the upper end of that range. It's not intended as a silver bullet. So I think it's important to recognize it's not a catch-all, but it is an important tool.
Are employers building workforce housing? Yes. Is it affordable? I would say generally not. And I think a problem lies with, again, how government's working. And I'm just going to note back to, I believe it was in July or August, I attended a town council meeting where St. John's had approached the town council and asked them to rezone the region where that currently is called a hitching post, so they could build more units for their employees. And the town council, as they typically do, set it off another month so they could make a determination at the next month to determine if they would rezone. And I was all for rezoning right then and there. Why not? Go for it. Let the hospital do what they want to do with the land that they have, and incentivize them to build more workforce units. That's fine. But then come to find out that the hospital has a SPET initiative that's going to make the community pay for it. That to me doesn't make sense. So we're incentivizing these employers to build houses. We're going to pay them to build it, and then where is the incentive for them to keep it affordable? So I think it's just looking at and really dissecting how we're doing this and making sure that these zonings are interpreted equally throughout, and that we're not incentivizing unaffordable workforce housing.
Thank you for the question. I think the issue here is really ultimately community character, and by extension that sense of belonging that I talked about earlier. The fundamental fact is that we have far more demand for housing than we have housing available. And so those people who are earning what might be considered traditional incomes in Jackson, many of the faces as I look around the room, people who are working, whether it's in the tourism industry or whether it's in services, teachers, hospital, government workers, pharmacists. It's becoming increasingly difficult for anybody making anything but a lot of investment income to live here. And so the question ultimately for me, rather than focusing on the specific details which Arne went into with great clarity on workforce versus affordable, how do we get a consistent a large amount of income into affordable housing for this community? I think there are two ways to do it. One is a real estate transfer tax, which is going to take working with our legislative delegation at the state level. I would also like to see us try to implement something in every deed for every new building where there's a tax that goes to housing. There's something like that at Shooting Star, there's something like that down at the Snake River Sporting Club. So the real issue to me is not so much the designation, but trying to get the money in that will allow us to build enough housing to really get to where we need to be to tackle this issue at any level.
Thank you. So running for public office is an eye-opening experience for many reasons, but one of them is the stories that you hear from people living in the thick of it, people grinding every day to make this place run, calling up and saying, I'm struggling. I cannot do this anymore. I'm being forced out of the valley. I'm a small business owner that did the right thing. I started my business. I built that workforce housing, and I'm still living in Idaho and driving my kids over the pass every day to school. So there's some piece missing there with the workforce employee housing piece. I serve as the vice chair for the Teton County Planning Commission, and I can say that every application that's come across our desk, they opt for the fee in lieu for the affordable housing fee. They aren't actually building it, they are just writing the check. And there's no problem writing the check because it's easier than actually building the housing. So it's not working the way it's supposed to, the way it's intended, and it also is just one piece of the puzzle, like Arne mentioned. It's not the silver bullet that's gonna fix it all. And we've gotta focus our efforts on the people that need housing the most. The homeless people, the homeless kids. We have over 50 kids in our high school, don't know where they're gonna sleep every night. That's not okay. So I think we get stuck on some of these other topics and we don't talk about the really awful ones that are going on in our community. And there's a lot of them that we need to address and talk about louder.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Caroline, and Kat will answer first.
So several audience members have submitted questions about senior living and elderly in our community. So whether or not the SPED initiative for preliminary planning passes, it'll be many years before there will be an assisted living center. What can the community do to house its elderly, and where do senior citizens fit into the housing crisis?
I think that's a great question. I know there's been a lot of discussion on what's happening at the Legacy Lodge, which was originally where a lot of our senior citizens were. And when that shut down, they were shipped off to every which place, which was kind of a horrific thing to have happen to our community members, especially our local community members who have pretty much been born and raised here. So if the Legacy Lodge, I've heard discussion that they might even be opening to reinstituting that as a senior citizen living facility. I understand that's in the county, so that wouldn't necessarily directly be our realm of influence. But if that's something that they're open to, just judging that that's what it was once before, and that the county has chosen to not allow them to move forward with what they wanted to do for workforce housing there, maybe that's something that they could approach the county with. With regards to other avenues, I think it's important for longtime locals who have lived here again for forever and have houses here, who have been kicked out pretty much by increased property taxes. I'd like to alleviate that burden so maybe they can stay where they're at with the house they've had for forever instead of having to move out of this county that they've called home for forever. So I think that those are a couple of options that might be able to alleviate some of this crisis for our senior citizens who've been here for a long time.
I agree. This is a series of really great questions, so thank you very much. I want to start with something that I think is a reality of running for office. Running for office is an individual sport. It's all about I, me. Governing is a team sport. It's about we. It's what can we do together. And the reason I mention this is because when Legacy Lodge was, what it used to be Legacy Lodge, was first built, I was serving as a trustee at St. John's Hospital. And we worked with the developers and a lot of other people. Collectively, we came up with a solution. Right now, all of us can agree that our seniors, they deserve our respect, they deserve our care, they deserve our love, and they deserve anything we can do to try and help them stay in the community that they've given so much to, the place that they've helped build, the place that they've stewarded. I don't have the answer. And that's something that you're not supposed to say when you're running for elected office. But what I do believe is I believe in this community. I believe in the we. I believe that if we put our mind to it in the same way that we looked at 15, 20 years ago and saw that there was a problem with assisted living and our seniors, and we came up with something and it worked for a while, and now we've got to do it again. And I think that's the thing that government can do best, is help convene around a particular issue and help address it directly. So that's how I would go about approaching it, and I look forward to working with St. John's and the Senior Center and others to try and find this solution. Thank you.
Thank you. So other communities have the same issues that we have across the board. And for some reason, a lot of the time, we like to think that we're the first one that's happening to. Seniors have been pushed out of a lot of other communities. It's happening here. And the first step is keeping them in their homes for as long as they are able to be in the home. There are other programs that are amazing. I geek out on this stuff and I go to other places. There's one called Board and Care. So you team up, an elderly couple they want to stay in their home, they're not ready for that next step in life yet. With a younger person that doesn't have a place to live in Jackson, they can park their camper there, they could help with yard work and stuff. There's actually a huge national program called Board and Care. Why aren't we doing it here? I don't know, I just learned about it recently. The other thing we can do to help keep people in their homes, which is the first step, is work with our state legislators, and navigate Cheyenne well. That's something I'm very comfortable doing. I go down there every legislative session, and that's something that we need to be working on. It's keeping seniors in their home, capping property taxes, so that at retirement age, they know they're not going to get the rug pulled out from them. Because I know when I reach retirement age, it would be devastating to have to sell the home that I've worked my entire life to stay in, just because the taxes have gone up so much. And then there's a whole other issue of we need to build more housing to house our seniors when they're ready to leave their home. But I'm out of time. Happy to talk about that later.
Thank you. Senior housing is part of that continuum of housing that I referred to earlier. And it's something we're, as a society, nationwide, appreciate those comments. It's something we're learning more and more about that. We're getting better about accommodating that. And in this community, likewise. It's something, and I very much appreciate there are several references to property taxes, keeping people in their homes. That's the first step. I want to acknowledge the work that we do in this state. We have a refund program. Last time it was in place, there were 91 people that took advantage of that. Our state legislators are working on expanding that. I don't want to predict what happened in Cheyenne, but I suspect that one will be successful, where they'll broaden that refund program to meet a wider cross-section of our community, do a better job of keeping people in their homes. And I think that really is the first step. The other thing that the town council has been doing, and I think there's room to do more of, is to support the infrastructure within this community that is structured around providing support for the seniors in our communities. The senior center is the key element to that, and making sure that they have the funds and the resources to help keep people in their homes, to get food, to get care. The programs that they have right now are oversubscribed. We need to look for ways to expand on that. This is a hard discussion because we're all going to get there. I just had 2 hip replacements in the last year and a half. I'm not as old yet, but I'm getting there, and that was a real indicator of what that's going to feel like. So that's something that I think we all need to take a step back with humility and recognize that that's us, and we need to really take that seriously. We're doing work, we can always do more. And I want to really do a call out to our state legislators about focusing on keeping people in their own homes. Thank you.
Great, we've had 5 meaty questions, and the next one comes from Sophie, and Jonathan will answer first.
Questions of social equity are ubiquitous, but often in the background of government. In December, the newly formed Equity Task Force will come before the Town Council for the first time. What communities do you hope to focus on to increase equity, and how will you personally engage them?
So I was proud to support the Equity Task Force when we approved it last year. And they're doing great work. As you indicated, Sophie, they're going to be coming in front of us probably December. And we have not yet, it hasn't been shared with us exactly what they're going to say because it's part of the work in progress. So one of the most fascinating things, or one of the most important things that we did when we approved the members of the task force was to try and make sure that we were representing all of the voices in Teton County that don't have a voice, or that have a quieter voice and aren't necessarily being heard as well. So it was our Latino community, it was our senior community, it was other people of color, people of different orientations. And so I don't want to predict what the task force is going to bring forward. But what does matter is that we make sure that we do a much better job as government in listening to those quiet voices, the ones that aren't getting heard, the ones that aren't getting honored. And it gets back to the sense of belonging that I was talking about. If you have a way to feel like you belong in this community, then we have a sense of community. But if you don't feel like you do, then we don't. So in terms of specifics, obviously 30% of our population is Latino. Fewer than 3% of our registered voters have Latino surnames. That's not right. And I hope that we can also establish some sort of youth task force so that we can get the voice of younger people in, because the decisions we make today are going to affect their future as well.
Thank you. So DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is something that I get a little frustrated with in the sense that the first thing we all think of is the color of somebody's skin. Our community has so much more diversity in that, and so many more people that, what am I trying to say? This is what happens when you start looking out at the audience and you see people you know smiling at you. It really cuts across the color of skin, and diversity is all sorts of things. The Equity Task Force is great. I think it's been a long time coming. Other communities have it, and we should have it as well. I followed the process on how the people were selected, and it wasn't as transparent as it should be. And I don't actually know that we got the diverse representation that we're looking for on that board. I'm one of those people that I see an issue and I do something about it. I don't just talk about it or study it. I want to make a change. And the first thing that I learned was over 20% of our community, according to the last census, is Latino. So what have I done? I've translated all my campaign materials into Spanish. Why haven't we done that at the town and county level? Why aren't the websites in Spanish? Why aren't the intake form for the affordable housing units was just translated in the last year? This is not something new, and these are baby steps that we can take to make more people welcome and have access to the information to participate. You can't make eye contact with people.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion is critical to the health of this community. It adds to our resilience, it adds to our community character, it's who we are. This process is one where I think as government, as individual elected officials, as individuals within our community, it's one we're always learning. We're always learning about others. And doing that in a respectful way with humility, I think is really, really important. I'm very proud of the Equity Commission as a first step. And looking forward to what they're going to be presenting to us. I don't want to get ahead of them. I don't want to try to predict where that's going to come from. This is a matter of of learning and listening, as I said, with humility. This is something that is dear to my heart. Many people have heard me say versions of this, but when growing up in this community, we were less diverse than we are today. We are a stronger, more resilient community today because of the additional diversity we have today. And that's something I feel very strongly about. And listen to those voices, take a deep breath. We can always do better. We're not doing as well as we could because this is new territory for many of us, and that's okay. We are making steps. We are seeing improvements. I've heard from several folks that have been part of that process as individuals, and they're so appreciative of the fact that their voices are being heard. Their voices are at the table. They're very excited to bring that work to us and to present that work to our community. I'm very much looking forward to that.
Would you mind repeating the questions? There were two, weren't they?
Yes, the two-part question was, what communities do you hope to focus on to increase equity, and how will you personally engage them?
What communities do I hopefully, well, I'm running for the community of Jackson. And I understand that the Hispanic community, the Eastern European community that we have with seasonal workers, those are definitely a part of our community. But ultimately, what I'm running on is I want to be able to afford to live here and eventually be able to afford to buy a house here. And I think that can resonate with all kinds of communities across the spectrum. And because I'm a renter, I just saw my rent increase because I know property taxes went up. And I know y'all know that property taxes just went up. That's making it difficult for every facet of the community. So I'm looking to focus on specifically those workforce families, those longtime locals, these newbies in town who are trying to make it work, and these renters that are trying to figure out how we're gonna afford to live here. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running. Ways to engage them. I'm running to represent not necessarily them from a skin tone level, but them from a desire to try to live here and be successful here. That's how I'm representing them. What I'd like to see is more community engagement so that different facets of the community can understand that they can run exactly like all of us are running too. I know these guys have heard me say this more times than maybe they care to. The barrier to entry to run for town council was I had to fill out a page-long application and submit a $25 application fee. We could see a very diverse next town council race if people knew that that was the barrier to entry and that's it. And I'd love to see that. I'd also encourage more community events. I love to go line dancing and swing dancing, and I love to go to salsa nights. I think if we combined that and had a huge community event like that, it would be absolutely epic. I gotta stop there.
Thank you. The next question will come from Caroline, and Devin will answer first.
The wastewater treatment plant is 42 years old and would cost up to $32 million to upgrade. What can you do as a town councilor to improve water quality?
Okay, so this is a great question. I actually went and did the videos with Protect Our Waters JH today. They put out a great series, so when those come out, you can hear what all the candidates think about wastewater. And one of the biggest things I've learned about our current, now I'm blanking on what the name of it is, it's the different pools.
Cells?
Somebody help me here.
Lagoon cells.
Lagoon, yes. I was thinking like Blue Lagoon, but I was getting a different image in my mind. The wildlife is really hurt by those. So this just isn't our water quality, our drinking water, the fish in the river. When birds land in those first few ponds, their likelihood of survival isn't very good. So we've got to upgrade this at some point. How we get there funding-wise, I'm not quite sure. I don't have an answer to that yet. But we do absolutely need to upgrade it and protect our only water source in Jackson Hole. It's hard because we look outside and we go, our water's beautiful. We recreate in it, like our kids drink it, whether we want them to or not. And it's hard to see that we really do have a lot of water quality problems here. So we've got to address those, and if finding a way to upgrade our treatment plant out of the lagoon H's would be a great thing to do for our community.
Water quality is key to all of us. It's one of the things that we each demand. We need it to survive. Take it very seriously. And I think I'm going to actually, let's add that at the moment, the beginning here. This is going to take a little while. Wastewater treatment, Town of Jackson has the largest wastewater treatment plant in the community. It does a phenomenal job. Every time we have a third party look at it, we get high marks. Yes, it's older technology, but we manage it really well, and we beat the requirements, we exceed the requirements, whether they're state requirements or federal requirements. That being said, and I say this in my context as an architect when I talk about building codes, building something to code is the worst building you can legally build. Treating our water through the regulation is the worst thing we could legally get away with, right? That's not good enough for us. And that's something I think as a community we're very much starting to engage in. So the town of Jackson, there are 3 things that we've been doing. Initially, and I'm seeing former councilman sitting in the back, he gets a lot of credit for this, we've been investing millions of dollars on stormwater. That's something that doesn't get a lot of attention. We've been doing it a little bit each year for at least 15 years. That is phenomenal. And we're doing a much better job than we used to in stormwater runoff into our water systems. The other thing we did in preparation of the county's master planning process that's taking place right now, this is a community-wide discussion, is we did a plan, we did a study to say what is the capacity of the largest facility in our community. That's done. That will then inform our county-wide process. The other study that we did, these are critical studies, was what are the range of options? What could we be treating to? What should that goal be? And we're just beginning to do this, be associating costs to some of those choices. So you mentioned the $30+ million. That's the highest level of treatment options that we were presented with. That doesn't take into account the increased operational costs. Those are all part of the equation. How do we provide to do better, which I think all of us would agree with, do it in a way that is affordable, recognize that the ratepayers in the town of Jackson tend to be, this isn't across the board, but tend to be those that may have the harder time paying more for higher quality. So how do we structure our rates to acknowledge all of us as a community and all of our ability to be able to take part in doing better with wastewater treatment? I'm very much looking forward to the county master plan process that's really that's where this process will be embedded. The town council and the town of Jackson and our ratepayers will be a key part of that because we own this biggest piece of infrastructure. And how does that mesh? And I will completely guarantee with everyone in this room and watching, this is one of the big items that the town council will be dealing with in the future. Ensuring that we do a good job, we exceed the expectations of this community, we do it in a way that is financially responsible. And I'm very much looking forward to being part of that discussion. Thank you.
I attended the last town council meeting where they discussed a study that was done on the wastewater treatment plant. And Arn is right, it sounds like we're outperforming everything with regards to where we should be, right? And that's a great thing for us. But one thing I noticed is we were discussing the accumulation of sludge that happens in these different cells, and how eventually either that sludge is going to have to be taken out of these current cells, or what I think is actually pretty brilliant, which I would be in favor of, is creating a new cell, diverting the fans that aerate the water and everything to that new cell, and let the old cells grow over with vegetation. And that will enable one day, I'm assuming, I didn't ask this question at the town council meeting, one day that when that other cell that we've created to make this water usable, that can then be transferred back to these cells that have overgrown with the vegetation that sludge has been taken care of. So basically it can be this back and forth process is how my little mind was seeing this. And I think that's a really great thing for us to start looking at and preparing for. Also, I'd just like to mention that the rodeo and fairground parking lot is where all of our snow from our streets accumulates, and we spread that out, and there is a state-of-the-art filtration system below those rodeo and fairgrounds that filters into Flat Creek. And there's also wetlands right across the street from there. So we already have things that are working, and I suggest that we maintain those.
Thanks. I just wanted to start out, if you go on the town's website and you click the En Español, the town's website is in Spanish. I wanted to bring that up. As far as water quality, the place that I start on any of this are the first 21 words of the town and county comp plan, the vision statement, the first 6 words of the vision, preserve and protect the area's ecosystem. The final 15 words are the rationale. Why are we doing this? In order to ensure a healthy environment, community, and economy for current and future generations. And in that context, it's appalling that we at the head of the Snake River ecosystem and this drainage have impaired streams. It's appalling that we have water quality problems, but we do. And the critical thing about that, in my view, is that that's the canary in the coal mine. And what that tells me, if we're having water quality problems, then other things are going to start following from that. And you take that a step further, and what that tells me is we have reached a point where we can no longer take for granted those things that we, for the last century or so, have taken for granted. And it's not just environmental health, but it's the health of our community and it's the health of our economy. They're all tied together, and the key is the first 6 words: preserve and protect the area's ecosystem. So when we look at water quality, however much money we get, the question is, what's the most cost-effective way of improving our water quality? Maybe it's fixing up the sewer treatment plant. Maybe it's getting rid of septic systems. The research that we've been doing over the last couple of years to more clearly identify what's going on is the real key there, and we have to do the most cost-effective thing that we possibly can do.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Sophie, and our answers first.
In the event of a recession in our tourism-based economy, how would you approach balancing the budget? What budget items would you cut first?
It's a great question. Budget is an important item that I spend a lot of time thinking about. 77, if I remember right, % of our budget is sales tax revenue. Sales tax revenue by its nature is cyclical. It goes up and down. So it's not if, it's when. And that's why we have fund balances. It's why we maintain a fund balance in order to even some of that out. It's also important to recognize that right now, the vast majority of our budget is in core services. When we went through the last downturn, we were making choices about capital expenditures, about freezing positions. Those are the two kind of first at the top of the chain there in terms of slowing those expenses down. It's a matter of prioritizing and looking at those core services and we do that very, very well. I think most people would acknowledge that. We do a great job of plowing our streets. We do a great job of our police force and our policing in this community. We do a great job of our wastewater and our water systems. It's a matter of looking for efficiencies there when we get into those downturns. I am very optimistic about this community's future and our ability to manage through that. This year we have a budget. We had a budget increase. A budget surplus due to one-time funds. We were investing that in capital projects and deferred maintenance and filling positions. Those are the kind of pluses and minuses we do in the budget process. Thank you.
Y'all, your town council does not think a recession is upon us. In 2023, they are expected to spend $8.3 million more in expenditures than they have coming in revenue. Where are they taking those additional funds from? Our reserves. We're not acting like we're coming up to a recession. And if we want to start doing that, we do need to see some budget cuts. Where would I cut those? Core services, which was touched on. I have heard from a current town councilor that there's a neighborhood over in East Jackson that got sidewalks that no one in the neighborhood wanted. Do you know how expensive it is to put in sidewalks? If we don't need them, the neighborhood doesn't want them, let's not do it. Why are we doing these things that people don't want? Other thing, I looked under general unallocated. Then you shift down to another chart that goes to townwide services. Then you have to shift down to another chart. I'm just following the highest percentage of increase from 2022 to 2023. And you get to professional services increase from $72,000 expenditures in 2022 to $1.2 million in 2023. What the heck are professional services? I've been asking, and people keep giving me the runaround. What it's come down to, I think, is they've done a compensation study. I understand some of that might make up for some raises for people, that's fine, but I also think that they're hiring more people in your government. If you all are asked to tighten up your belts, right, the government should be doing it too, not expanding. I see expansion, not contraction.
There are a lot of things to unpack in one question there. What I would like to focus on is what happened 3 years ago when Arne and I were pretty new on the job. COVID hit. And what did the town of Jackson do? It took a very clear-eyed, sharp-penciled look at our entire budget. and we said, where can we cut? Where can we not stop spending? How can we make sure that we are doing what we are doing as efficiently as possible? So what did we end up doing? After very carefully looking at what it is we were trying to do, how much it was costing, and where we could gain efficiencies, and by asking our people to sacrifice, and they sacrificed amazingly for this community, what we ended up doing was lopping a huge amount of money off of our fiscal year 22 budget, or 21 and then 22. And we were able to get through COVID very well. We didn't have to lay anybody off. We kept providing a very high level of core services. If a recession comes, in part, or if it continues to affect our sales taxes, in part we're going to be levied because our construction revenues continue to go up at a very rapid rate because there's so much construction going on. But more critically, the way that we should approach any of this is the same way that we did it 3 years ago, by taking a very careful look at everything we do and figuring out exactly where we can save some money without destroying the core services that we provide, and by extension without destroying the people who do it, because we have to take care of the people who are working for us as much as we have to take care of this community and everybody in this room.
Hey, oh, sorry.
Sorry, I
I
snuck
was
up on you.
ready to
I know you're ready. I agree. During COVID, everybody had to tighten up, right? But your government did not do the same. They really did not. They voted themselves a salary increase, and they voted to increase your property taxes in 2021. They're saying one thing and doing another is how I see it. And I just want to make sure, and I want to let you all know, what I'm saying is I will actually go in there and try to cut spending and try to alleviate those tax burdens on all of you, because I know you're hurting. And right now the town's not hurting, you guys are. I want the town, I don't want to say I want the town to feel the pain, but I just want to make sure that our government is falling within our community. Right now I don't see that we have a revenue problem, I see that we have a spending problem. And I hope, and I want to rein that in.
Right, she got me all fired up. Now I've lost my train of thought again. Okay, so electeds cannot be an expert on everything. Our town manager cannot be an expert on everything. It would be great if we could all stand up here and say, this is the solution to this is the solution to that. I'm an expert on everything. I can analyze it all, and I can tell you what we need to do. The reality is it's unfair to expect that out of anyone. And if we enter another recession, I'd actually spend money on some sort of financial director that could guide us in the right direction on what to do and where to trim the fat. Because every budget can have things trimmed out of it. We can get through it. We can do it. Am I an expert on what those things should be, though? Probably not. But there are people that are, and those are where I know my place. I know to stay in my lane and look to people that can give us those answers. So I can't say, oh, we should cut this and we should cut that right now, because we don't know what that looks like. I can say we should not raise taxes in town. More taxes are not the solution to that. And we've got to look to the experts. But we also can dig in a little bit, like Kat's done. And I know, the budget is actually really confusing. If any of you have looked at it, it is not. I mean, I consider myself a pretty intelligent woman, and it was like, I didn't even know how it was all laid out. It was pretty confusing. So we'd have to take that one step at a time and get an expert involved too.
Thank you.
Oh, I think it's me. Yeah.
I think so.
Do you have to answer and then I go first?
Didn't I answer that one?
I'm losing my
Yeah.
mind.
You
I'm
have-
sorry.
Yeah, I
I'm
think-
losing my
no,
mind.
it's
It's getting late.
It's getting late, but this is fascinating, I hate to cut it off. So we promised you all we'd be out of here by 8. So we definitely have time for a wrap up, and if we are, do we have one more question?
We have some cards.
I think, so we can, let's do a whole enchilada situation, get everyone out of here. I think we should do your final statements, let people know where to reach you if they have more questions, which they certainly do. And I liked the answers we got when we asked about something that we didn't ask about that you care about. So to recap, this is your closing statement. Tell us one thing you care about that we didn't ask about, and tell people where to contact you.
Terrific. And Kat will start.
One thing that wasn't discussed would be some of the specific town ordinances. At the last town council meeting, they brought up an ordinance on, let me see if I can find it here. Ordinance P, attracting wildlife and feeding. And in that ordinance, this is very specific apparently, but we're going with it. I promise there's a theme here. In that ordinance, it is quoted saying, no planting of new ornamental fruit-bearing trees. And this is supposed to deter wildlife from coming onto your property and causing havoc. Don't you think that our law enforcement has better things to do than coming to your house and citing you for an unlawful fruit tree? I'm looking through some of these town ordinances, and I'm seeing you need to cut some of this stuff out. And so that's one thing that I would do, is really do a deep dive into this. So fun. Municipal codes, I love it. But I'm willing to do this and cut out the crap that we don't need. This is just one example of the things that I think is a complete overreach. Telling you what kind of fruit trees you can have in your backyard. I just would like more discussion on that, on some of these ordinances. It doesn't need to be this specific, but the overarching theme for me is, are we going a little too far with government overreach? That's one thing I'd like to see discussed. So, with that, my name is Kat, and I'm running because I see local government, any type of government, as a revolving door. And I think our local government and our state government and our federal government need some new perspectives, some new ideas, and that's ultimately why I'm running. I see it as my civic duty to do so. I'd love to rein in spending, which I've touched on tonight. I'd love to invest in common sense housing and growth for local families especially. I'd like to preserve Jackson's Western heritage. I really would. And so with that, I'd humbly ask for your vote for Kat on November 8th. Thank you all so much for being here tonight.
Thank you very much, League of Women Voters and panelists and fellow candidates, and to all of you, of course. It is a lot of fun. It's hard work, but it's so rewarding. I will start with contact information. My website is the letter, my initials, JS, the number 4, JH.com, JS for JH.com. My telephone number and other contact information is on there. The easiest thing is just remember the JS for JH.com. Happy to talk to anybody at any time. My closing statement. I'm running for 3 reasons, or it boils down to 3 reasons. The first is sustain what matters. What matters is our environment, our community, our economy. Those are the things that I want to focus on, and those are the things that I care deeply about. And most importantly, it's the things that we as a community have agreed that we care about. The second plank of this is get stuff done. It takes a while to get up to speed, and it takes being a good team player. And I think over the next 4 years, there's a real opportunity to get things done in our community. And critically, because of the tremendous socioeconomic forces that are washing over us, there's a powerful need to get stuff done. That takes experience, it takes deep knowledge of the community, it takes proven ability to work well with others. I believe I have those, and I have the motivation to keep going. And the final thing is, I want to leave Jackson Hole better than the place that I found it. I think that's something we all share, and that takes a lot of hard work. Again, we can't take it for granted anymore, but this desire to leave Jackson Hole a better place than the place we found it is what's motivating me. And as far as something that wasn't discussed, the question for me is, it doesn't come up in any of these. They're very issues driven, which is great. But the question for me that I would like to be able to talk about is, where would I like this community to be? Where would any of us like this community to be in 4 years after our term in office is done? And I think it gets back to that, leave this place better than the way we found it. And that's really the thing that I would like everybody to try and explore and to hear more about. Because if we can't set that vision very clearly, it's going to be very, very difficult to get there. Thank you.
Do you have next level there? Okay, e-bikes. Let's talk about those for a minute because we didn't bring it up. It's a hot topic. Where else in the United States do you go and you see hundreds of kids riding these things to school parked out front where the price tag starts at around $1,500. I mean, I had a Huffy with like a banana seat and the streamers, so we've got to regulate those. I know nobody likes to hear more regulation from the government, but we've got to keep our kids safe. We've got to keep the people walking on the pathways safe, and we've got to look out for the drivers that there's going to be an accident soon. I'm surprised there hasn't been one. So e-bikes are a big issue that need to be dealt with right now, and the town has already started to address that. I'm running for office because I'm like you. I'm really frustrated what's going on here. We continue to see the things that we don't want to see on the front of the newspaper. The luxury hotels, the luxury townhomes. We keep seeing them go up day after day, and Jackson is screaming for change. You all are screaming, no more of this. We don't want to see it anymore. And I hear you, because I'm screaming it too. I'm really frustrated. I'm a worker, and I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and get to work and make the changes that need to be done. I think it's time to give some new voices at the table a chance and some different perspectives. So I'm ready to get to work. I know what it looks like. I'm ready for the commitment, and I'm ready to be alongside you to make this change happen. So I'm Devin Beeman. Please ask for your vote now and between now and November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you very much for everyone attending, people that will be watching the recordings. I really appreciate this, appreciate all of these discussions. These are fun, these are enjoyable. My webpage is orangeoregonton.com, very creative there. I was surprised it was available. But my contact information is there. Feel free to reach out. I love talking with anybody about any issue, sometimes for far too long. And so I really would look forward to that. I would say, we've done a good job in covering a wide range of issues. A lot of those issues we didn't get into the depth that we really need to. And I think the one that I'd like to just touch on very briefly again is the property tax component. We have 1/2 mil of property tax in the town of Jackson. We added that so we would come into parity with Teton County paying for fiber EMS. Because of the fluke of state statutes, that wasn't getting applied. So we're now paying the same as Union County. We've dedicated that to fiber EMS. It's about 0.86% of our property tax bill in the town of Jackson. Continuing to help work with our legislators. First year that I was elected, I went and spent the full session, almost the full session, down in Cheyenne. And we'll try to do that whenever possible. To work with our legislators, to have their back when they need us speaking up, and then also to be there and to begin to build relationships with the legislature. That's critically important, particularly when it comes to things like property tax reform and refund. That is critically important, and I think we've got a great group of people to work with and continue to support them. I'm running because of this deep, deep love of this community that my parents, all 4 of them, there's some stories in that. And all 4 of them have instilled in me a deep, deep appreciation for this place. Ree's the one smiling the biggest because she knows some of them really, really well. And that's why I'm here. That and this community of place that I mentioned earlier. That's why I'm here. I'm here for you as a community. Yes, there are always things we can do better, and I fully commit to that. And really looking forward and humbly ask for your vote and your support. Starting now, we can vote right now. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Did I get one more? Yeah, I forgot to give you my contact info, and I saw the whole stack of extra questions. So my contact info is catherineforjackson.com. You can email me. There's a contact form on my website, and that's Catherine. It's the long version, KATHERINE, the best version. So thank you, Jackson.
I forgot to. I'll be brief. I have cards here, and there's some out on the table with all my contact information. Reach out anytime.
Terrific. Everyone for joining us tonight to meet the candidates for Town Council and House District 16. Our community is so fortunate to have such a wonderful group of people from which to choose. Kudos to each of the candidates for your dedication to our community. thank you for your thoughtful comments. You provided important information so that we are more informed. Thank you to the media panel for your wonderful questions, and to the entire forum team, the Wyoming League of Women Voters, Teton County Library, Jackson Hole News and Guide, Jackson Hole Community Radio, KHOL 89.1, Buckrail, and WyoFile. And then finally, thank you to you, our audience, for striving to become better informed voters. You make a difference. So remember to vote in the November general election. And as an added bonus, these forum sessions are recorded and available via the following websites: the Teton County Library, Vote 411, the Wyoming League of Women Voters, their websites, and JH Community Radio, KHOL 89.1, will be rebroadcasting these sessions. So check them out. Also, don't forget to mark your calendars to join us tomorrow night for our forum with the candidates for the Teton County Commissioner and House District 23. Stay positive, test negative, be safe. See you tomorrow.